Reset Podcast. And now your host, Jake Naraki.
What is going on, Reset Nation? Welcome back to Operation Self Reset. This is the one and only place to believe, do, and thrive when it comes to anything and everything in your own personal life. That's what Operation Self Reset stands for. Changing, transforming, starting anew, a better you. A better you in a better direction, whatever it means. Operation Self Reset wears many hats, has many coats, and has many variables to it. So with that out of the way of random talking, let's dive into the interview today, which is with Shayna Norris. And Shayna and I connected on Elance. I needed some assistance for helping me with the Operation Self Reset. I was going to say Operation Self Reject. That's not what it stands for, and that is not the new tagline, people. So with that out of the way, I just want to say that this interview is very personal. Shayna really takes us through her own struggles of trying to find direction in her life. She has a passion for writing. She didn't know what to do next. She got fired from her job. Her husband was very supportive. It's kind of a thing I think a lot of individuals, not only in this country but around the world, are dealing with when it comes to jobs creation, jobs diminishing, and overall enjoyment of your life. It's always that struggle of what now and what to do next. So hopefully Shayna gives you some insight, gives you some variables and ideas on ways to get past certain struggles when it comes to your own personal life. So here is the interview with Shayna. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Shayna Norris on with us for today. Shayna and I connected online, but it's not online dating. It was actually through Elance. I needed assistance helping me with some of the show notes and back-end stuff for this podcast, and Shayna and I connected, and it worked out great. And Shayna has a story that I think relates to a lot of the listeners out there, and I wanted to bring her on because she has a lot of insight, and she has done a lot of things since kind of her whole story unfolded, and we'll dive into it. So Shayna, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Shayna, not too many people know who you are. Do you mind giving us a little background on your background of upbringing and also kind of the things that unfolded recently?
Okay. Well, your listeners can probably tell from my accent that I'm from the South.
Right.
But I grew up in a little town in North Carolina where I spent most of my life, although I have lived a little bit in South Florida. But I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a writer, and that's what I always wanted to do. But my family kept telling me to find another job, find something that would pay the bills. So I
sounds about right. Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. So one of my other things I got into when I was 16 back in 1996 was I started creating websites, and so I really loved doing that. So I decided to go to college for graphic design. And back then, at that time, the program I was in was really focused on print graphics instead of multimedia.
Sure.
So what I learned in web design, I really learned on my own, but I learned the graphic design fundamentals from my college education. So I got a job a little while after graduating college. I got a job working for a local newspaper, running their websites and doing advertisements for them. And I worked there for 12 years, from 2000 to 2012. And then in early 2013, it was actually January 2013, my manager came and told me that our web team was being laid off. Ooh. The entire web team. So that was, it just kind of threw me for a loop. Yeah. Because this was the job that I had for so long. It was really the only graphic design job I had done. Before that, I had worked a little bit in a locksmith office, but that was the only other job I'd had. But luckily, I was writing already at this time, and I had already published a few books. And so when this happened, I knew that I had wanted one day to go full-time into writing, but I hadn't really planned for it to happen like that or so soon.
Sure.
But after talking with my husband and thinking about it, looking at our finances, I decided not to go back to work, to write full time and make that my job and see what happened.
Sure.
So I've been doing that for over a year now.
Nice. Well, yeah, congratulations on adapting and overcoming that pitfall. Do you mind going into detail, though, that moment when you got let go? The emotional turmoil you went through, your husband, your family members. Were you worried like you weren't going to find your next thing? Like, did you kind of, how long did it take you to recover? Do you mind taking us through that process?
Yeah. It was really sad. I don't really want to say anything bad about the company that I worked
That's fine.
with, but we had been bought out by a new company the year before. So we had gone through a lot of changes and things had really not been as good as they used to be for a while. So we had already seen some other layoffs before this happened, but we were the only web team. We were the ones running the website. So we hadn't thought that they'd get rid of us.
Right.
So it was very upsetting. And, my family was really supportive about whatever I decided to do. And my husband was really supportive too. He was the one that when I came home and told him that this was happening, he said, well, you always wanted to write full time, so why don't you try that? Sure. This might be your chance to do it.
Cool.
So he's been really supportive. I have off and on looked into graphic design jobs, but I live in a very small town, a really rural area, and there's really not very many opportunities around here. Right. So that's why I ended up getting into Elance to find some extra work.
Yeah. And that's how I came upon you. And if you guys are listening, Shana does all of the kind of the logos and design for the podcast episodes. So if you guys like that, that is her behind it. So I appreciate that because I do not have a skill like that. So thank you for that. But let's talk about, though, when you got let go and your husband was very supportive, and that's always reassuring. How did you feel? Like, were you kind of, obviously you're mad and angry and disappointed and sad, but after your husband said to you, well, you always wanted to write full time, like, did you feel confident? Like, yeah, okay, this is my moment to start writing full time. Were you like, oh, yeah, I want to write full time, but I like that, bi-weekly check, or that weekly check or whatever. I like that revenue coming in all the time and not feeling the pressure. Now I create my own future. Or did you like that?
I was really scared, really nervous. I'm the kind of person that I really like to have things set and know how much money I'm getting each month. And as being self-employed now, my paycheck goes up and down.
Sure.
So it's hard to plan. One thing that really helped me, and it's really funny that this happened, but I had read this person who's really well known in the scrapbooking world named Allie Edwards. She has a thing she does each year where you select your word for the year, your word that's going to be, you're going to put this word as a reminder to yourself for anything that happens throughout the year. And my word I had picked at the end of December was trust.
Nice.
And so then this happened toward the end of January, and I really had to remind myself of that word I had chosen, to just trust in myself and where I was going and my dreams. Yeah. And I still have to remind myself of that all the time.
For sure. And recently one of the motivational minutes, I know you didn't listen to it because you just did the design for it, but it was talking about one simple idea, and it's talking about grabbing one word for that year. And she might have got the same concept, whatever. But I spoke highly of that. I truly believe that if you're able to grasp one word for that year for 365 days to kind of push you through to reach those big goals, you can really get yourself towards success. And do you feel that latching on to trust really propelled you in the right mindset, the right direction when it came to, man, I might have to really rely on this word for this year now because I'm in that situation? Did you find that word beneficial to yourself?
I did. There were a lot of times when things got really difficult because also just recently my husband went through job changes, and he didn't get laid off. He changed voluntarily, but he ended up out of work for a month. Okay. And so that made things really hard financially. And I was really having to hang on to this word, to just trust and keep believing that we'll make it through it. And things have gotten better. And I really think holding on to this word and just believing in myself, it's really opened up some new opportunities for me. I just recently sold one of my self-published books to a digital publisher, and I had never even considered this option before, but it just came to me through my agent. My agent hooked me up with it last summer. And that's one of the things that I had to think about. If I hadn't believed in myself, I don't know that this opportunity would have come.
Right. And speaking of, we'll touch on your books in a little bit. And Shanna is a powerhouse of books. I mean, I just found out she has a lot of books that she has written and continuing to write. And wow, it's awesome. But before we dive into that, though, let's talk about what people can pull away from this, through your struggle here. You understood that you got let go. There was absolutely no way that you could get your job back. You had trust in your family. You had trust in your husband. You had a skill of writing. You knew that would be beneficial. And you know what? This is my time to start writing full time. But even during that time, you thought, man, I think I need to get some extra revenue. And you went to Elance. Do you mind talking about Elance and what were you thinking when you decided to start jumping on there? And explain Elance for the people that don't know what Elance is.
Okay. Elance is a website where it's not just for writers, and it's not just for graphic designers. There's all different kinds of jobs people post on there looking for someone to do this, like people wanting articles or blog posts or book covers. They want their books formatted. There's even, I've seen some like office type work, administrative type work posted on there. So I don't really remember how I found Elance. I think it was through someone else that I'm friends with on Facebook who's a writer. I think she had mentioned it. And so I looked at it and I had signed up for it, but it actually took me months before I ever started trying to bid on a job. Sure. I would just keep looking at it and looking at the jobs. But I would keep thinking, well, what I really want to do is write my books. But it got to the point that wasn't enough to pay the bills. I needed some extra work. Sure. So I started going to Elance and bidding on jobs. And, at first I didn't get jobs. It took a couple of months before I started getting some jobs. But it was really just a need for some extra money.
Right.
And I knew that I had been looking into freelance writing, writing articles for magazines and all. And I had pitched some magazine ideas, which I either would hear, no, we're not interested, or I'd never hear anything at all. So even after you get published, it's still difficult to continue to get published.
Sure.
So I decided to go into Elance and start bidding on some of those jobs for different blogs or websites that wanted some short articles. And I had already self-published a couple of my books, and I was doing the book covers for those myself. And so I had learned also how to format ebooks. So I saw some jobs for people looking for book cover designers and ebook formatters. So I said, well, that's something that I can do pretty quickly in between working on my books.
Right.
So that's usually the jobs that I bid on most often.
Yeah. And that's how many jobs did you do or stab at before you and I connected?
I think I had bid for probably at least 50 of them.
Sure.
And I think I had actually gotten maybe 3 that I had actually been hired for.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I'm glad you applied to Elance and everything like that. And for the people listening, and I needed help. I needed assistance doing the show notes and everything like that. And Shana had quite the credentials, and on Elance also there's like a ranking system. And I reached out to her, and we connected. And knowing her background in writing, and she said a little bit about the books that she has written, and I thought it would be a perfect fit. And so far, it has worked out great. I hope on both ends.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Good. And it just shows that if you are struggling and you do have some type of ability to write or creative thinking, design, or even book work, I know people that go on Elance and they even look for, hey, can you organize my email list, or my email, all the emails that I have in my inbox. I can't get through them. And they hire people on Elance to go through it. So even if you have skills or you don't, you are able to go on Elance and get a couple extra bucks, extra $10 here, $20 there. It all adds up. But like Shana said, it takes a little time to get the wheels going, to get a couple of rankings and ratings and stuff like that on your end so, people can trust you. I think that's a big one because when I was searching for people to help me, when I was going through Shana's thing, I was looking at her rating. It's on a 5-star platform and, you want somebody that's trustworthy, they'll do the job, that's good. And, it's not only people from the U.S., but it's people from around the world. So you're really getting a huge array of people that could be applying to your job. And or if you are looking for a job, remember you're fighting against a lot of other people. So at first you might have to start off low to get good rankings and show that you're a good person before you can start applying to the bigger gigs. So anything else you want to add to Elance?
No, I think you said it pretty well. You do have to start out with, you might have to go lower than you think your time is worth.
Sure.
Just to get those first few jobs.
Right.
And it is difficult, but once you get the first few jobs, then it picks up pretty well.
Right. So let's move on now to you and your writing skills. Let's talk about your books. You have currently 9 books, correct?
Right.
That is unbelievable. And when did you realize that you had a talent for writing these books?
I guess that would probably be in middle school when I was during class, instead of paying attention to class, I was writing stories and in my notebooks, and my friends would all read them, and they would come back to me like, "You got to write the next chapter. I want to know what happens next."
Awesome. So you had that creative gene within you, and you just had a knack for writing. And so, tell us one of your more popular books. Where did you get the idea for it? How can people find out about it?
Probably the most popular book is probably Troy High, which came out in 2009. And that's one of the books that is traditionally published. It was published by a publisher in New York. But it is a modern day retelling of the Trojan War. Huh. And the Trojans and the Spartans are 2 high schools that are huge football rivals against each other. And that story just came about because of my love of Greek mythology. I always knew I wanted to write a retelling of a Greek story. And the other inspiration for it was my own experiences in high school, living in this small town where my high school and another one in town are huge rivals against each other. So I took that and just exaggerated it and turned it into the story of Troy High.
Cool.
And I still get a lot of emails about that book, so I think that's my most popular one.
Cool. When that publisher decided to pick it up, was it like a dream come true? Like, were you shocked? Were you like, oh my God, I finally made it?
Yes. That was actually my second book. But they also the same publisher published my first book, Something to Blog About, and they bought that as a 2-book deal. So it was Something to Blog About and Troy High together. And yeah, it was amazing.
Sure.
I had been trying to get published since 2000. I had been trying to find an agent or a publisher, and I had written to so many agents over the years telling them about my books, and I was getting nowhere. I would get a lot of no responses, and others were, it's just a typewritten form letter that just says, thank you for sending us your manuscript. We're sorry, but we're not interested right now. So it wasn't until 2006 that I got my agent. So it took 6 years to get an agent.
Take us through the time when you were when you were sending out your books and sending out your stuff, and you're getting denied and denied and denied. I mean, did you start to have that internal kind of like, oh man, maybe I'm not that good of a writer? Did you have that self-doubt at all creep into you?
I did, many, many times. I even, in 2005, in the beginning of 2005, I had gotten so many rejections. I just told my husband, I'm like, I quit trying to get published.
Wow.
I'm not going to get published anymore. I'm not going to try. I'm sorry about that noise.
That's all right.
So I told my husband in early 2005 that I wasn't going to try to get published anymore. I just give up. I'm not going to write. I'm not going to do anything. So I took about a month where I wasn't writing and I wasn't even thinking about it. And I was still getting a few emails coming back in from agents saying that they weren't interested, just some of the things that I had sent out months ago that they were finally answering me. And so I would just read them and then immediately delete them and just pretend I hadn't even seen them.
Sure.
And then after about a month, I had this idea of a book. It was different from the other books I'd written because before I was actually trying to get published as a fantasy author, like stuff like Lord of the Rings.
Sure. Okay.
So at this time, I had an idea for a book about a teenage girl. It was a modern day book. So I decided, well, I'm not trying to get published anymore. I'm just going to write this book just because the idea's in my head. I'm going to write it just for me, and nobody's ever going to see it.
Right.
And I wrote that book in 3 weeks, and then I started doing some revisions on it. A few months later, I said, well, I really like this book. I'm going to it's different than the other things I've been sending out, so I'm just going to send it out and to a few agents, and I'll see what happens. And that was the book that became Something to Blog About.
Wow.
That's the book that got me an agent and then eventually got me a publishing contract.
Wow. Congratulations. That's awesome. That's
Thank
awesome. You decided to just kind of throw it on paper and you enjoyed it and you thought, hey, this might have some legs, and you let it walk. So that's awesome. And what do you say to somebody that was in, or going through that same situation that you were in, that you wanted to just give up, you kind of took your mind out of the game for a little bit and you just kind of walked back into it, you kind of gravitated back to your computer and started typing away. Do you suggest people, if they feel that they just want to quit and let go, do you suggest that they give themselves some time to kind of just clear their mind and get refocused? Or, I mean, what did you learn out of that you can share with the people listening?
I think if you feel like you need to give up, do give up, but you don't have to give up forever.
Sure.
Just take that time to yourself and refresh, just
reset.
take a break.
We're gonna use reset.
Reset. Yes. Just reset everything, and just take the time to have a break and quit for a little while. Don't be afraid to quit if you need to, and tell yourself that you quit. You're not trying anymore, and just enjoy quitting for a little while, and then when you're ready, you'll go back to it. And that was one thing that I learned, that when I was ready to try to get published again, I went back to it, because I couldn't stay away from it forever.
Sure.
Even though at the time I really didn't want anything else to do with it.
Right.
But if you are trying to get published, and it is very difficult. I mean, you do read about people who the very first try that they write a book, it gets published and makes millions of dollars. You hear about those,
right.
But those are very few that happens to. Most writers, most of the ones I know, don't make a lot of money. They write just because they love to write,
right.
And that's what you got to do. It's a very hard business, but you have to love it to succeed in it.
You know, and I think that's a valid point you said there. Two things. We'll go with the more current one that you just ended with. If you have a passion for it, you're not going after it just for the money. It's not like, I'm going to sit down and I just want to make billions of dollars and be a New York Times bestseller and I'll hit it big. Then you're in it for the wrong reason. You're going to get burnt out. You're going to get annoyed. The revisions are going to wear you down. You're going to hate it. You're not going to have the enthusiasm as if you just have that passion for it, that desire to want to tell stories and drag people into this fantasy world or these different stories that you create. It was just very clear on how you just said that some people get into businesses for the wrong reason. If you get into business for the right reason, everything will open up to you without you really trying too hard. And the second thing that you hit upon was failure. You don't have to quit forever. People fail all the time. It doesn't mean you need to stop it and let go of it. Give yourself a little break. Let yourself re-energize. Get your mind off of it. Then it'll allow these new ideas to flow back into you. Where do you get your inspiration for these books and ideas? Do they just come to you just from watching TV or reading different stuff, just naturally?
It's different things. My first book, Something to Blog About, came from something that happened to me in college. I exaggerated the idea. That's what I always say, is that I take a little idea and then I exaggerate it.
Yeah, sure.
I have another book, one of my more recent books, The Rules of You and Me, which was inspired actually by this house when I was still working, and this house down the road from me. One morning I saw a shirt hanging from the tree in their front yard, like hanging from a clothes hanger from a tree limb. And I thought, okay, well, maybe the shirts just left. Maybe they had a yard sale this weekend and the shirts left from the yard sale.
Sure.
But that afternoon it was still hanging in the tree. And for weeks, this shirt was hanging from the tree. And it got my mind wondering, like, why do they have this shirt hanging from the tree? Why don't they take it down? So I started wondering about why someone would hang a shirt in the tree and leave it there every day. And that actually inspired this book, The Rules of You and Me, where the main character, Hannah, she goes to visit her aunt in Asheville, North Carolina for the summer. And down the road from her aunt's house, there's a shirt hanging in the tree in front of this house. And she ends up stopping one day, looking at it, wondering, why is this shirt hanging there? And it makes her meet the who becomes the love interest in the book.
I see. Cool.
So there is a reason behind the shirt hanging in the tree.
Sure. That is so cool you opened up like that to drag us in through the process. Some people would just be like, yeah, I saw a shirt hanging in from a tree, and I was like, oh, that's clever. And then it just gave me the inspiration. But you connected the dots, and then you decided to formulate the story around that shirt. And it's funny because I bet you if I saw that shirt in the tree, I'd be like, oh, that guy left that shirt in the tree. And I'd just continue on my way. I would not even think twice about it. But for some odd reason, that was, eating away at you, or you're really curious. and it just flowed into a book. I mean, talk about taking just something that you're curious about into an idea, into a story. You wrote it down, and then now it's a real book. I mean, that is unbelievable. So, what do you say to somebody that just feels that they're not creative? Are we all creative, or can we inspire ourselves to find these little tricks that you just did to write a book? Where does this creation come from? Do you think it's from within, or do you think we can create it?
I think we all have some creativity in us. It might just manifest in different ways. Yeah. I do think, I know people who have said in the past that they could never write a book or write any kind of story, and then ended up writing a story one day. I do think there is a lot of it is natural that you have to have, but then there is also a lot of it that you can learn. You can learn the fundamentals of storytelling. There are tons of books that tell you how to put together a plot.
Sure.
So you can learn some of it, and then other parts that you do need to have some natural love for it. Writing a book isn't something that you can sit down and do in an hour.
Right.
So you do need to love it to go through the whole process and write something that someone will actually want to read and enjoy.
Right.
But just because you're not drawn to writing doesn't mean that you're not creative at all. Your creativity just may be somewhere else. It may be in graphic design or painting or singing.
Yeah. No, and to kind of, because we talked earlier a little bit, and I'm trying to write my book, and I'm setting aside little chunks of time to write and everything like that. What do you find works for you? I'm interested to see there might be people listening that want to start a blog or just start journaling or even to write a book. They have this idea. How do you sit down and tackle the daunting task of writing a 200-page book? Do you do it? You set couple hours a day? How do you formulate that?
I set a goal when I'm actually in the process of writing a book, which right now I just finished a first draft of a book. So I'm taking a little bit of break before I start actually writing something new. But I set a goal each day of writing at least 1,000 words that day. That's what seems to work best for me. Not to say, okay, I'm going to write for 2 hours or I'm going to write this many pages. Is the 1,000 words seems to work best for me. And sometimes those 1,000 words come really fast, and sometimes it takes me all day.
Sure.
But what seems to work best for me is to just get up and do that first thing in the morning. That's usually when I'm the least distracted. And sometimes it doesn't always work out. Sometimes I have to write later in the day, but I can tell that I'm not as focused.
I see.
It seems to really help to just get up before anything else gets into my head to get these words out. And then I feel more productive on those days when I can do that first thing in the morning.
Sure. Yeah, I always think that's interesting how people formulate. See, I'm a writer at night. And that's when I get my creative thinking from around like 10 o'clock to like 10:30. And it might sound weird to some people, like, oh, come on. I mean, how do you know what time your mind really starts clicking? I don't know. Maybe it's because that's the time I'm always sitting down working on projects or writing and stuff like that. So maybe that's what has just started naturally flowing at that time. It's like if you are always used to waking up right away and going for a run, and if you wake up and you don't go for a run, you kind of feel out of it a little bit. It's kind of the reverse effect. So I just thought that was really interesting. But Shayna, though, thank you for sharing your whole story. And to kind of wrap this all around, somebody that had a traditional job, got fired, you started collecting a little money from Elance, then you started, really diving into your passion. Now you're nine books in and you're already writing a couple more. What do you say to somebody that got fired and they're kind of wondering what their next step is? Do you have anything for them? And I know this is a big question and you may or may not have the answer, but I'm just curious to see if you have anything that you could suggest to somebody that is going through the things that you went through.
First of all, like my word for last year was trust. Just trust that you'll get through this. It probably will be a little hard, and you may run into even more problems later on, like our financial problems that we had. Our rough spots didn't happen right away. They happened months later when I really started to wonder, am I on the right track? Is this really what I should be doing, or should I go back to work? Right. But just if you need to take some time to yourself, find a way to just take some time and reset your mind and your spirit to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? And is this my chance to do what I've always dreamed of doing? Or should I just go and get some other job that I'm not really going to be happy with, but at least it's going to pay the bills?
Yeah. No, that's good insight, because some people, as soon as they get fired, they feel like they have to rush into another job. But you're right. This might be a time to reflect on your path, your journey. What do you want to do with your life? So very well said. Shana, how can people get in touch with you and find your books and everything like that?
You can find out about my books at my website, www.shananorris.com, and that's SHANANORRIS. And you can find out information about my graphic design work at my other website, which is spndesigns.com. That's as in Shana Perry Norris Designs.com. And you can also find me on Facebook. Just search for Shana Norris. I'm on there, and on Twitter.
Cool. And where can we find your books and stuff like that?
You can find all of my books at Amazon. If you just search for Shana Norris, you'll pull them up. You can also find them on Barnes & Noble and iBooks, and also Kobo.
Okay. And last question, I always end it. What does a self-reset mean for you?
A self-reset, that means taking the time to just take a time out and figure out what will make me happy, what path do I need to take in this life before I start taking that step. Self-reset just means to figure out what I want and take that time to really listen to myself and not listen to what everyone else thinks I should do. Yeah,
that's a good point, because a lot of people can affect the direction you need to go in, depending on what they feel is the right thing for you to do.
Right.
Everybody wants to live everybody else's life except their own.
Yeah.
The people that have the best answers for you or what they think you should do is the person that hates their job and wish they could do something about it, but they can't. So they just rather, give suggestions. But Shana, I know your story is going to inspire people. A lot of people out there have gone through some struggles, financial struggles, job struggles, all that stuff. And thank you for taking us through your journey, your life. It's really inspiring to hear that you believed in yourself, you trusted yourself, and so far things are doing A-okay. So thank you so mumuch for joining us on the podcast here, and we'll keep in touch.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Shana for coming on the podcast. That's when I asked her to do this, she at first was kind of bashful, and she didn't know, and I really didn't know her full story. And as you can tell, as it unraveled, I mean, she has really gone through some stuff, and that's what I love about this podcast in particular, is because everybody truly has a story. And I know you listening have probably gained some knowledge from her own personal story and the other people that I bring on this podcast. And it's so true. Every single person, doesn't matter if you're famous or nobody knows you, everybody has a story. Everybody can learn something about each other to enhance their own life. So whatever that enhancement is for you, take it, grab onto it, and use it in your life. Shana has gone through some stuff, but as you can tell, she's on her way to doing better. She's found clarity. She's feeling good about everything. And I want you to think about the same things when it comes to your own personal life. Along with that, if you know somebody that's struggling, if you know somebody that lost their job recently, if you know somebody that just got fired, quit, whatever it may be, maybe offer this podcast to them, because I believe Shayna's story can give them hope and give them some direction, even though they feel like there is no direction. So with that being said, thank you like always for joining me on the Operation Self Reset podcast. If you're interested in finding 6 high-quality PDFs to help you reset your own personal life, head on over to the website osreset.com, and halfway down on the homepage, you will find a little opt-in box for the toolbox. It has majority of the things that you need to get your life back on track. So with that being said, you guys rock. I appreciate you so much. If you have any questions for myself, or if you have somebody that you feel would be appropriate for this podcast, please send it to my email address, ask@osreset.com. You guys make it a great week. We will catch you next week Wednesday for another Operation Self Reset podcast. And also stay tuned for Mondays, Motivational Minute Mondays. Take it easy, guys. We'll talk to you soon.